The psychologist and psychotherapist Eugene Gendlin, who I think studied with Carl Rogers, but is also associated with phenomenology. He wrote a book called Focusing. I think it's in the early 60s he wrote it, but it's been republished several times since. And his book Focusing, as I understand it, comes out of an observation that he made when he was working with Carl Rogers, or working with Rogerian therapy at least, noticing that some people responded to the therapy and some people didn't, and there was a consistency in that difference of response. And what Gendlin recognised, or said he recognised, was a difference in the kind of listening quality of the people who were able to respond, who were able to benefit from that therapy. And this listening quality is something that Gendlin eventually went on to call the felt response. It was almost as if the people who were best able to make use of that therapeutic technique were those who were able to be aware of their own bodily responses, the somatic and proprioceptive and interoceptive changes that were taking place inside their body, to sort of listen to what their body was telling them, if you like. And that process of being able to be internally aware, somatically aware, as I say, was a key factor in the success of Rogerian therapy and counselling techniques. And as I say, Mr. Gendlin went on to develop a technique of his own, which he called focusing, and which was designed to promote and utilise that sense of felt listening, felt responses, felt awareness, kind of internal viewing of the state of one's own body in order to find things out about how that somatic awareness is affecting one's performance, or one's health, psychic health perhaps. And the focusing technique itself, and I don't want to have to go through the whole thing, but basically it's in 6 stages. And there's something quite interesting, I think, about the mechanism through which it works, which relates to some of the other stuff I've been talking about in these videos. And the first 2 stages, I think, are particularly revealing in these terms. The first stage, he calls these movements, actually, which I think is also quite interesting. But the first movement in the focusing process is usually referred to as clearing a space. Clearing a space. And what I think he means by that is that the first thing one does is one asks oneself a question or proposes a statement to oneself, almost as if you're talking to your own somatic systems. And that question is, I feel absolutely fine, or something like that. You make this proposition that you feel absolutely fine, and then you listen to what your body says in response to that. And what your body says, or how your body reacts, is a kind of formulation of any issues or concerns registering in the body that might contradict that statement of being fine. It's almost as if you're saying to your body, I feel fine, and then your body's coming back and saying, oh yeah, what about this then? And so you become aware of a vague sensation, and Gendlin says it's supposed to be vague. It's a vague, amorphous, ill-defined sense of something forming in front of or inside or around oneself, which is the not fineness, if you like. So already, I think, in this first movement, and in relation to the idea of clearing a space, which is how he refers to this process, is the sense in which one is starting to distinguish the space in which one's self exists, one's ego, one's personality, one's whatever you want to call it. that space and the possible issues, concepts, ideas, thoughts, concerns which might occupy that space. So to the extent that one can feel in a kind of an amorphous entity forming, made up from the embodied issues and concerns that are troubling you, that suggests a separation between those concerns and oneself, and that the space that one is clearing, if you like, is a space which might contain those concerns, is not coterminous with those concerns, and is not coterminous with one's sense of self. The second movement, which clarifies that even more, I think, is when one goes in to identify those concerns and issues, one at a time usually. You allow one to arise, fully form it as clearly as one can in terms of how it feels and what its significance is. And then he says you put it down, or you put it to one side, almost as if you've coalesced or congealed an object out of this amorphous mass, which has well-defined properties, and then you can do something with it, which, as I say, is either put down or put to one side, but could be held up to view and examined and so on. That's perhaps something one would do later. But the first thing to do is this setting aside. So again, that clarifies, I think, that spatial metaphor that's going on in here, in that what was initially a sense of oneself as perhaps slightly troubled has changed, and the change has come about by initially conceiving of a space in which one exists, then allowing issues to coalesce out of those as felt bodily responses, those issues to become more and more clarifying, just kind of objects in that space, and then for them to be put down. So what's happened there, I think, is that the space and the concerns, the sort of issue objects within that space, have become radically separated, and one is no longer attached to those. In fact, there is this sense of a detachment. I don't really want to go into the other four stages, they're slightly different, but I think what we're already seeing in Gendlin's model there is this use of the idea of space and a kind of understanding of knowledge, to the extent that concerns and issues and knowledge conceptualized, or not conceptualized, experienced as the felt responses of the body, and then conceptualized as increasingly solid, distant, distinguishable objects which one can relieve oneself of, step outside of, and feel the immensity of the space, and the clarity, and the calmness, and the quietude of that space.